Welcome. My name is Monica. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us at Temple of Geek. Really appreciate it.
You should wait till after the interview to see whether you thank us or not. It's nice to speak to you. Thank you for having us. We appreciate it.
I just want to say congratulations on having the season renewed for its second season. It's very exciting.
Thank you.
My questions will be for the both of you. So my first question is, I'm really curious as to how the idea to bring the comics to life came together. Were the comics something that you had grown up with?
Well, we're probably a little bit younger than the people that grew up with it. Although we do run into people our age who seem to have. I mean, I think like the comics were at their heyday, probably like, maybe a decade or so before we were really of that age. But I think two of the original producers who secured the IP, Mark Canton and Courtney Solomon. Mark, who was at Woodstock actually, and spent some time in Haight-Ashbury. He was a huge fan of the Fabulous Freak Brothers, and had always wanted to do something with the IP. I think maybe he was even thinking of it as live action at one point. Wow. But so he actually pursued Gilbert Shelton, who was the original creator of the comics, and he and Courtney went to Paris to meet with Gilbert's lived in Paris for a lot of years now. Went to Paris, met with him, kind of told him the vision, which was a little loose back then, but I think just a general idea that it would be animated with some of the top adult animated writers now, would have that sort of Simpsons, Family Guy sensibility, and American Dad sensibility where we were, and possibly that we would find a way to set it in present day, just from a marketing standpoint. Right. But for us, it's we'll go back and forth on who answers what questions. Maybe I'll just do that. But for us, the sensibility of it, the sort of the theme of it, the type of humor, very much in our wheelhouse. And so we were really introduced to them. Introduced to the comics once we were told about the project. I mean, I'm very familiar with Art Crumb. I've kind of heard of Gilbert Shelton, but I wasn't really brought up on them the way some other people were. But then read them all, read every existing comic, and
then talking really to Courtney Solomon and Mark, and the notion of, all right, let's bring these guys through a magical way into present day, so we can have these innocent three guys and their cat. And bring them to present, and then be able to throw them in all fish out of water situations.
And the other thing that appealed to us when this was about 3 years ago now was the huge number of similarities between what the country was going through in the late 60s, the 60s, the late 60s especially, and what the country's going through now. Because even though these guys are coming into a time which they're completely unfamiliar with, all of a sudden we've got two factions in the streets. We've got, polarized political parties. We've got arguments about social issues. We've got kind of another sexual revolution in a way, all these things that they sort of, and to us that was really interesting, because they're not just like, what is that? We never heard of that. In some ways they were like, wait, you guys are still arguing over whether or not people can just own their own sexuality and it's nobody else's business. We were doing that 50 years ago. I thought we settled that. So, and the sort of Nixon-Trump comparisons, which, when we first started weren't even quite as and then it just sort of started to develop. And another example, we actually came up with this idea. What if Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos decided to fight each other as who to get to Mars first? Like, we had come up with that idea really early. And then they started doing it. And then, in an even weirder thing, Pete Davidson, who plays Phineas, was going to go with them. And we'd already done an episode where Phineas went to Mars with them. So all these things just sort of were coming together. And the more we encountered that, the more we realized we're onto something. But long-winded way of answering your question, but just trying to get there.
And then on that note, so how much of the storylines from the comics do you translate into the modern times and now? Or is it more your writers just kind of go with themes from the comics?
I think it's more, it's taking the characters from the comics Although, you know, we switched Kitty's gender because we were going to get Tiffany Haddish, which we thought would be a nice, you know, twist on it, would be great. And the, you know, some of those storylines, you know, they're not suitable for present day in terms of what they were back then. But you know, it's really the characters and putting them, dropping them as we really did.
They're inspired a little bit by them, but you know, a storyline for a strip, you know, for a one-page strip or a couple-line strip is does not always get you 25 minutes of animation. But we'll go back and say, I mean, like there's a series called Idiots Abroad, which is kind of a you know, an adventure that they went, and we're looking at that now and saying, well, we would do it exactly the way they did it. But the idea that these guys go to a foreign country and just completely screw things up and almost start World War III, that was the idea then as a one-liner. And we're like, all right, well, what's our version of that? Now it's a different world. They would get there differently, and you know, maybe get there for a different reason. But
we try to drop in every now and then, you know, where relevant, some characters from the past. Norbert the Narc made an appearance in season 1, and so it, you know, there's a inspired by it, right? You know, taking them, and I think that's what audiences want to say. What brings it?
You know, one of the big challenges that we had, and it goes both ways. Just when you're saying inspired by the comics, that one of the major obstacles that the whole comic was built on is how do we score weed in a world where weed is illegal, right? So it was all about, is there a guy on the corner, and then there's this you know, main character from the old comics, Norbert the Narc, a guy who was constantly trying to bust them for getting weed. Now they live in California, and there's a dispensary. There are more dispensaries than there are, you know, regular drugstores out there. So it's interesting to sort of say, wait a minute, you just took their biggest obstacle away, but they still don't have any money, so they still have to find a way to still get the weed. And but you know, that was like that you know, what do you do with that? So we tried to say, well, what used to be an obstacle in scoring weed because it was illegal, how do we now make it an obstacle today? You know, it's too expensive. It's too corporate for them, you know, because they resent it that way. It's, you know, what about supporting the little guy? What, you know, so all the ways to try to modernize that, but it can still be inspired by the idea that today our goal is we're gonna score some weed and not work, you know.
Absolutely. And you know, as far as like, do you have any rules that you hold yourselves accountable when it comes to like tackling some of the difficult subjects and keeping them lighthearted?
Well, I don't know if there's necessarily rules, but I think the key that help makes it work is that these guys are innocents. They don't come with an aggressive or mean spirit to them. And so when things have changed in today's world versus before, they don't know, and they come to learn. You know, that we had it in an early episode where they were applying for a job, and Phineas laughed when he was talking to a woman. He's like, you know, well, I'll wait for the manager, and she's like, I am the manager, and he laughed at that. He like, it didn't occur to him that a woman could be a manager. But Franklin realized, wait a second, you know, things have changed, Phineas, and so, you know, he wasn't deriding her.
He wasn't laughing at her. He like thought she was playing a joke on him. So the idea is that, I mean, that's like sort of one, you know, keeping it light in that we have to, if we do that, we have to make sure the audience understands afterwards that's coming from a place of him being out of time, not him being a misogynist. In the original comics, there was much, you know, there was some misogyny. We've just taken that and we've just made them much more, you know, they're much more libertarian. They're just sort of like, you know, hey, if, you know, a woman makes the best president, then I'm voting for the woman. That's the thing. It's like, why wouldn't I? You know, and then I think the other, it's a good question that you asked, which is that, you know, Seinfeld, Larry David had the, you know, no lessons, no hugs, and it's interesting because I just saw an interview with him where he said, I'm famously quoted as saying that, and I didn't believe it at all. You know, like actually. All of our episodes were about something. Maybe we didn't hug, but they were always about it. And for us, it's if we get to an issue, we mention it. We sort of have a point of view. Maybe we show both sides of views, but we don't preach. Like it's just even if everybody in the writers' room feels really strongly in one way, to us it kills the comedy. It kills the tone of our show if it becomes obvious that we've got something to say. Like we rather just observe and comment, and if we can on both sides of an issue. I mean, not both sides of an issue where like the other side is it's pedophilia, but both sides of sort of a political issue. Than to say, damn it, this is what we want to, this is the point we want to make today, because it doesn't work for our characters. It doesn't become funny. They're not that passionate about anything, except getting high. So.
Absolutely. And then speaking about your characters, are there any characters that you two are particularly fond of?
That's the old which is your favorite child question.
Yeah, well, I'll put it this way. I'll answer in a slightly different question, which is that if there were characters that I'll speak for myself, that I was more fond of before we cast this and started doing it, the excellence of our cast has elevated to them where I really do love them all. I mean, we weren't sure about Phineas. We really weren't sure how to, because we were writing him very sort of aggressive, very kind of, not angry, but it did take a lot. And when Pete Davidson started voicing him, it just became funny because he made it himself and he made it so ridiculous. And, we had heard some other actors and we were unsure of it. And I always liked him, but now I love writing for Phineas because I just know that when Pete does the line, it's just you're just on board because he's so passionate about something that he shouldn't be, which is what Pete's able to do, or to make fun of himself without sounding like he's making fun of himself.
But as writers, the adage, and this goes across all shows, if you have a show where you're like, everybody goes, there's, I can't use Alan brought up Seinfeld. He said, "Oh, I like writing for George and Elaine, but the other guys, not so much." Then you failed in creating a show. Everybody should go, I want to write for every character because they're all great. And I think we have great characters here and an amazing cast, not just our main four, but everybody who works in the show. So
great supporting. We've been on shows like that, by the way, where you've got one or two funny characters and you spend nights in the writing room trying to figure out how to make somebody else funny, and then by halfway through the season you're figuring out how to get them off the show because you can't do it. We have actually a happy problem, which is every single one of our actors is hilarious and we can't get them enough in the show. We wish it was an hour long because we have Adam Devine and Blake Anderson. You could write an entire show with just those two characters. They're that funny and they ad lib a lot and they bring it in. We have trouble getting them in enough because we have a whole family. We have the Freak Brothers, but I mean, when you have the luxury of, hey, these are kind of like our co-stars, and we can't be in the recording booth without cracking up, when they speak. They're that funny, very nice guys too. But we're just super, super lucky. It's a ridiculously talented cast.
And when it comes to that cast, because it is a terrific cast, I love Kitty. Tiffany, amazing. When it came to casting the characters, did you already have certain people in mind, or how did you ultimately end up with the cast that you have now?
Well, we got lucky because we'd said, all right, let's put the list together, who the people you want. And literally every first choice we had was Woody Harrelson, Pete Davidson, Tiffany Haddish, and John Goodman. And we're like, all right, and then there's other people you have on the list, but like, you want to go to all these people, go, well, let's start at our wish list and see if we can get them. And they all, luckily to us, responded so well to the material, and we pitched them the characters. And we were thrilled,
It never happens that way. Even when you're doing an A-list movie with an A-list director, you don't get the cast like that. And in the case of Kitty, when we decided, we sort of had this voice in mind. We said, well, what voice are you talking about? Can you describe the character? We said, yeah, Tiffany Haddish. Well, no, but what's the character? Well, there's just think Tiffany Haddish. And then they're like, well, what if you don't get Tiffany Haddish? And we were like,
I don't want to hear that.
Don't ask us that because I don't have a second choice right now. I mean, there were second choices, but she has such a specific voice and attitude and comic timing that we were like, if it's not Tiffany Haddish, we might have to rethink of how we're doing, the character. But because we wanted to change Kitty to this sort of suggested urban female, or sort of like just street tough female, however we say it. But
who was at the end of the day the smartest
and has the most common sense, and is willing to call everybody on their ship. But we got very, very fortunate because they responded to the the IP. We had the pilot written by the time we were able to go out to them, so they were able to see the pilot. And I think we even had a little bit of sample animation, and we were good at pitching them. But John Goodman and Woody were fans of the original comics. They knew them pretty well, so that worked well. Yeah,
That's awesome.
I think Adam and Blake were as well. They all knew the Freak brothers.
Very cool. Are there any specific episodes from the first season that you're really proud of?
Most of them, but I think there's this one that we did called Sex Robots, where it felt like we kind of crossed over into the, now we're making commentary, and it's like, as we were coming up with it, articles were appearing about robot sex brothels opening up in San Francisco, and we were like, wait, but we just invented that because it was so ridiculous, and now we're actually reading about it. I think the first one opened up in Houston. We were like, but we just made that up, and now it was happening. And I love that one. I love the one where we did one on the election called The Campaign that Alan and I wrote, where we thought it was pretty good sort of commentary on just essentially, in some ways, the most ridiculous, stupidest candidate has an advantage over other candidates because they never actually have to talk about the issues. And there are parts of episodes that I love when it feels like we've found a blend for the family, the Switzer family and the Freaks, to sort of interact in a way that's not just, swiping at each other, where they really start to care about each other. And in our second season, we really tried to hit some moments there where they need each other and they rely on each other. And Camille, our 13-year-old, actually goes to Phineas for advice, of all people, and you expect him to give her the complete wrong advice. So we'll give a little hint of it about she wanted to get lip injections, and he was like, I may be from the 60s, I may not fully understand it, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with your face, and it's not happening on my watch, so I don't want to hear it again. Like, ordinarily you'd have him say, like, kind of, how much will you pay me to drive you there? But, and instead he was like, and just little moments like that where, I think her hearing that from him meant so much more than hearing it from any of her parents or anybody else, because of course they would say it, but she was surprised that he said it and listened to him. So little moments like that.
Absolutely. And then when it comes to other moments, for example, you mentioned that there's so much laughing in the sound booths and while you're, recording and all this kind of stuff. Are there any moments that, like, laugh out loud moments that really stick out in your mind from creating the first season?
It's hard to remember. You remember we Alan and I direct the actors for all the episodes.
I think we talk about that Taylor Swift episode though, when Woody was singing the song.
Yeah, we did have an episode where we wrote a song for Woody to sing, and Woody, now just give you set the mood. We're directing, over Zoom. Woody is in Hawaii where he lives, and he's in his closet because that's the best way we can record him with some soundproof.
Acoustically, your closed closet is the best room in your house to record anything.
But where, he's like, first he gets it and he's looking at it, he's like, all right.
Well, the setup though is that he's Franklin, but he's so strung out on every, I don't know if you saw the episode, he's so strung out on every single type of drug. He was doing coke, they were smoking. I think we started to make up drugs that he was doing. And it's a parody of A Star is Born. And we tried to shoot it where from his perspective, they're killing it like Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga. From everybody else's perspective, they are so strung out of their mind and crazy. So Woody started, he's a musician and he's got a guitar, and he started singing it as Franklin, as high, and he started to ad-lib some of the words. And it was pretty fucking hilarious to watch, because he's an amazing talent at everything he does, but he just got into this. What would Franklin, stoned out of his mind, trying to sing these lyrics in a duet with Taylor Swift, of all people, and he really just, and he did various versions where he just started, kind of like having fun with it. And I had to mute my thing because I just couldn't stop laughing.
Turned out that recording the scene high wasn't actually that much of a stretch for him.
Right. Right. Yeah. He was a character for that.
He came into the record booth of characters.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And And pizza, but John Goodman will do that too. John Goodman has a way of, because he's a kind of serious. He's a very funny guy, but when he's working, he's very serious about it. He's very well prepared, and he doesn't like a whole lot of small talk before because he's in the moment, and so he's kind of standing there looking like John Goodman, like you've seen him in a lot of serious parts, and then all of a sudden he becomes this Freddy character, and just he'll be like, okay, yeah, sound check's good, sound check's good. I just pooped in my pants, like it just turns on a dime, and it'll shock you, and his whole he contorts them. Great voice actors will act physically to get that performance out, and he does that. He really just transforms into Freddy in front of your eyes, as we've seen him doing. He played Fred Flintstone and everything else that he
live
does.
action now, because now I want to see it.
Right.
Yeah, no, he would. I mean, if you were doing live action, he would be the guy. But there's just so many. We're very, very fortunate to have the cast we have. I mean, to work with that cast on any project is a sort of a career dream come true. So.
Absolutely. And my last question for you both is, as the series grows in popularity and grows in viewerships, what do you hope audiences take away with them when they watch your show?
Well, I'll speak for me, and it's a comedy, so we hope people laugh. But I think what separates we've done King of the Hill and a lot of their shows in between, but that there's comedy, but at some point there's a little bit of heart to it, and it doesn't have to be too much heart, but that that's what gets you to care about the characters, all of them. And so I think to me it's about people laughing at what's happening with these characters, and also that really is this family of characters that you want to come to week after week or binge after binge.
We it's a similar answer that I have, but we said in analyzing as we were going to, we said, well, the Freak brothers, they're not actually brothers. They call themselves brothers, but there's brothers. So they're their own family, and they're the closest thing any of them had to family. Now we put them in a situation where they're 50 years in the future, and we try not to address this because it might be too sad. Like, we don't know what happened to their father or their mother. I mean, probably they died while these guys were asleep. So we're not going to talk about that, and we don't know their brothers or sisters, and we don't want to get into that. But whatever friends or family they had before are not around anymore, most likely. So the Switzers are their new family, and the Switzers as a family they are a family. They're a fairly functional family, but they have their problems. So we try to, when we can, with a light touch, say, well, how do these two families sort of become a blended family, even though it's the weirdest group, and how does each of their family dynamics sort of help to the individual families? So we feel like if we can pull that off a little bit without being obvious about it, then there's a little bit more to keep watching. It's not just the jokes, it's not just the references, it's not just the outlandishness that we're able to do because they're on an acid trip or something like that. And hopefully we keep going with that, and that gives us multiple seasons, because sometimes the highest concept ideas, it's like, well, the guys from the past, you can do Bill and Ted's Adventure 1, 2, and 3, but when you get to number 8, you probably are, out of adventures. So you gotta find a way to, ground it in, we think it's in family and in, a little bit of observational comedy.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both so much for taking the time to speak with us. Really,
thank you for the great questions. They were all really
thank you, Monica.
Insightful.
Thanks to all the fans out there who are watching, and
please. We're very confident that season 2 will surpass season 1. We've worked out. We got some great new creative partners, and think we're just starting to hit our stride. So
I'm so excited for season 2.
Thank you.
Pleasure to see you.
Hope we talk to you again.
All right. Have a wonderful day.
All right. See ya.
Take care.
Bye-bye.